The garage door swung open before the sun had even risen. The cold sound of gears turning stirred up the anger in my chest. She dared to break into my house with the universal code she had been trumpeting for months. Her triumphant eyes and voice were like knives cutting deep into my self-esteem. She believed that the title HOA president was a shield for all her illegal actions, that I would continue to remain silent like so many others who had been oppressed by her. But she did not know that this time, her arrogant step had triggered a hidden trap that she could not have expected. And I was no longer the one who suffered. All the evidence was ready, just waiting for the moment she put herself on the guillotine. 2 years ago, I moved to Willowbrook Gardens in search of some peace and quiet, away from the noise and chaos of the city. I'm the easygoing type. I'm David, 32, a software engineer for a Silicon Valley tech company. Karen Thompson, however, is something else entirely. She's 38, has been HOA president for the past 3 years, and carries herself with the stiff authority of someone who believes her clipboard holds absolute power. But what she doesn't realize is that the quiet guy in the t-shirt is about to become her biggest problem, and this time she's picked the wrong battle. The trouble started innocently enough when I decided to convert my garage into a home office workspace. After nearly 2 years of working from home, I desperately needed a dedicated space where I could concentrate without the constant interruptions of daily life. I'd carefully reviewed the HOA regulations and was confident that converting the interior of my garage didn't violate any existing rules. After all, it was still technically a garage, just with some furniture added. Karen, however, had different ideas entirely. The moment she spotted me installing soundproofing panels and setting up a desk, she fired off her first warning letter within 24 hours. Any change in the functional use of garage space requires prior HOA approval, she wrote in her typical authoritative tone. I politely responded with citations from the actual HOA bylaws, showing that interior modifications didn't require approval, but Karen's campaign against me escalated dramatically from there. What followed was a systematic harassment campaign that would have impressed a military strategist in its thoroughness and precision. Karen began conducting surprise inspections of my property, armed with her measuring tape and camera like some sort of suburban detective. She measured my fence height down to the inch, scrutinized my house paint color against some mysterious approved palette that seemed to change depending on her mood. Every single inspection resulted in a violation notice delivered with theatrical ceremony. Fence exceeds regulation height by 2 inches, read one citation that arrived with a $50 fine. House paint color doesn't match approved HOA palette, declared another, worth $75. Excessive plantings not on approved species list, proclaimed a third citation for $100. Each fine came with a detailed explanation of how my violations were degrading community standards and negatively impacting property values. The fines kept coming with clockwork regularity, as if Karen had set up some sort of violation assembly line with my property as the primary target. The situation became significantly more serious when Karen began her rumor campaign about my supposed commercial activities. She sent detailed emails to every resident in the neighborhood, complete with dramatic language claiming I was conducting illegal business operations in my garage. The emails were masterpieces of suburban paranoia, describing how my activities were threatening our peaceful community and potentially exposing us to zoning violations. I've observed unusual foot traffic and equipment deliveries to the Martinez residence, one email read. These activities suggest commercial operations that violate our residential zoning and HOA covenants. We must act quickly to protect our property values and community standards. Suddenly, neighbors who'd previously waved cheerfully were looking at me with obvious suspicion and concern. Some even approached me directly asking about the strange noises coming from my garage, despite the fact that the loudest sound was me typing on my keyboard. Karen's campaign reached new heights when she organized a neighborhood safety meeting, specifically to discuss my garage conversion. Standing before about 15 concerned residents in the community center, she presented her case like a prosecutor addressing a jury. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, pointing to enlarged photos of my garage taken from the street. We have a serious violation of our community standards happening right under our noses. She clicked through her presentation with practiced authority. Mr. Martinez has converted his garage into what appears to be a commercial office space without proper permits or HOA approval. This not only violates our carefully crafted regulations, but potentially exposes our entire community to zoning violations and government scrutiny. Mrs. Johnson from down the street raised her hand nervously. Karen, what exactly are we supposed to do about this? He seems like a nice enough young man. Karen's eyes lit up with opportunity. That's exactly the problem, Martha. Nice people can still violate regulations. We need to be vigilant about protecting our community standards, regardless of how friendly someone appears. She gestured dramatically at the photos again. I've documented multiple code violations, and I have reason to believe commercial activities are taking place in direct violation of our residential zoning. The peak of Karen's power trip came when she organized a special HOA meeting specifically designed to address the David situation. Standing before more than 30 households packed into our community center, she displayed enlarged photographs of my garage taken from outside my fence, like evidence in a criminal trial. She accused me of violating numerous regulations with the confidence of a prosecutor presenting an airtight case to a jury. Has illegally converted his garage into a commercial office space, she declared with theatrical flair, gesturing dramatically at the photos. This not only violates our carefully crafted HOA regulations, but could potentially affect the business licensing of our entire neighborhood and bring unwanted government scrutiny to our peaceful community. The way she presented it, you'd think I was running a loud manufacturing plant instead of quietly working on software code in a soundproofed room. During this meeting, Karen introduced her most aggressive tactic yet: community surveillance. I'm asking all of you to help monitor the situation, she announced to the packed room. Document any unusual activities, take photos of vehicles that don't belong, and report anything that seems out of place. We need to work together to protect our community from these violations. Mr. Peterson from across the street actually stood up and asked, Karen, don't you think this is getting a bit extreme? The man works from home like lots of people these days. Karen's response was swift and condescending. Bill, I appreciate your concern, but this isn't about working from home. This is about unauthorized commercial operations and protecting our property values. If we don't enforce our standards consistently, our entire neighborhood could suffer. The social pressure intensified exponentially when Karen's surveillance network began operating in earnest. Some residents actually began photographing my house and documenting when I entered and exited my garage, creating detailed logs of my daily movements, like amateur surveillance operatives. Mrs. Rodriguez started a neighborhood chat group where people shared photos and timestamps of my activities. David left his garage at 8:30 a.m. and returned at 9:15 with what appeared to be office supplies, read one typical message. 2 delivery trucks visited the Martinez residence this week, reported another. The surveillance became so obvious that I could see neighbors positioning themselves at windows with cameras when I went outside. Karen had successfully transformed my quiet workspace into a neighborhood obsession. When Karen proposed conducting an interior inspection to ensure no illegal commercial activities were taking place, I firmly refused, citing my constitutional right to privacy. This refusal became Karen's rallying cry for escalation. You see, she announced at the next community gathering, innocent people don't refuse reasonable inspections. This behavior confirms our suspicions about unauthorized activities. Karen's threats became increasingly aggressive and legally questionable. She threatened to sue me for willful violation of community standards, threatened to report me to local authorities for unlicensed business operations, and even suggested she might pursue legal action to force me to sell my house if I didn't comply with her expanding list of demands. Each threat was delivered with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. Mr. Martinez, she said during one particularly heated confrontation at my front door, you have 48 hours to provide written documentation proving your garage activities comply with all HOA regulations and local zoning laws. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action and a lien against your property. I calmly responded that I was operating within all applicable laws, but Karen's expression made it clear she wasn't interested in fact. Throughout this entire ordeal, I maintained a deliberately calm and polite demeanor, responding to every accusation with careful documentation and official regulations. I knew I was operating completely within the law, but Karen seemed utterly uninterested in facts or legal precedent. Her goal wasn't legitimate enforcement, it was absolute control and public demonstration of her authority. What really frustrated me wasn't even the ridiculous fines or the constant harassment, but the way Karen treated me like a disobedient child while actively working to turn my neighbors against me with her campaign of misinformation. I gradually began to realize this wasn't just a simple dispute about HOA regulations. This was a calculated power struggle, and Karen had deliberately chosen to use me as a highly visible example of her authority. After Karen's brazen, illegal entry into my garage using her so-called universal code, I knew the time for passive resistance had definitively ended. Instead of confronting her directly in an emotional outburst, I decided to use what I knew best: advanced technology and proper legal procedures. The first thing I did was thoroughly check the security system I'd personally designed and installed throughout the neighborhood. As I suspected, Karen had used a basic hack code to bypass my garage door security, a deliberate vulnerability I'd left in the system specifically to track anyone who might attempt unauthorized access. Every time someone used this particular code, the system automatically recorded high-definition video, logged the exact time and date, captured GPS coordinates, and sent an encrypted alert directly to my phone with all the relevant data. I now had crystal clear evidence of Karen committing breaking and entering, complete with video documentation and digital timestamps. But this was just the beginning of what I would discover through my investigation. The security logs revealed something even more disturbing. Karen had been using this same hack code regularly throughout the neighborhood for months. Next, I began conducting a comprehensive investigation into Karen herself and the HOA's financial operations. With my extensive background in technology and data analysis, I knew exactly how to search public records efficiently and cross-reference information from multiple sources. What I found was deeply disturbing and far worse than I'd initially suspected. Karen had been systematically making unauthorized changes to the HOA regulations without proper resident approval or legal procedures. She'd added numerous vague, subjective clauses like appropriate colors and suitable activities without clear definitions or objective standards, deliberately creating opportunities for her to arbitrarily fine anyone she chose based on personal whims rather than legitimate violations. The financial records told an even more troubling story. When I meticulously cross-referenced invoices with bank statements and financial reports, I found large, highly unusual expenses for landscape maintenance and legal consulting. But there was absolutely no evidence that any of this work had actually been performed or that these services had ever been contracted. The real breakthrough in my investigation came when I decided to contact someone I'd never spoken with before: Mark Thompson, Karen's clearly uncomfortable husband. Through careful observation over many months, I'd noticed that Mark always seemed to deliberately avoid Karen when she was conducting her official HOA business, and appeared genuinely uncomfortable with his wife's increasingly aggressive behavior toward neighbors. When I called Mark directly and explained the situation, showing him concrete evidence of Karen's illegal entry into my garage, he began to gradually open up about his growing concerns. "I've warned her so many times about going too far," Mark admitted with obvious frustration. "She's been crossing legal and ethical lines for years now, and I've been worried something like this would eventually happen." Mark revealed information that confirmed my worst suspicions. "She's been using that code to get into people's houses when they're not home," he said quietly. "She calls it community oversight, but I know it's wrong. She's also been using HOA money for personal expenses, including hiring lawyers to threaten people who question her authority." His willingness to speak out gave me the confidence to dig deep. Armed with this crucial information from Mark, I began systematically reaching out to other neighbors who I suspected had been victims of Karen's abuse. I discovered that many people had indeed been targets of her harassment, but they were either too scared of retaliation or simply didn't know how to fight back against someone in an official position. Mrs. Rodriguez at number 15 had been fined $500 for inappropriate plantings that violated community aesthetic standards, even though those exact plants had been there for over a decade before she even moved into the neighborhood. "I paid the fine because I was scared she'd make my life miserable," Mrs. Rodriguez confided. But those roses were planted by the previous owner 20 years ago. Mr. Johnson, number 22, had been forced to repaint his entire house at enormous personal expense for non-compliant colors that damage neighborhood harmony, despite the paint being directly from the officially approved HOA palette. She kept changing her mind about what was acceptable, he explained bitterly. First the color was fine, then it wasn't. Then it was too bright, then too dull. I spent $3,000 trying to satisfy her demands. Most importantly, from a legal standpoint, I discovered that Karen hadn't followed any proper legal procedures when issuing these fines and violations. According to clearly written state law, HOAs must provide 30 days written notice and a formal opportunity to appeal before applying any financial penalties. Karen had completely and deliberately ignored these legal requirements in every single case. I also thoroughly investigated the security company that Karen claimed had provided her with the mysterious universal code. After contacting them directly and speaking with their management, I learned they'd never worked with Willowbrook Gardens HOA in any capacity and had never provided any universal code to anyone anywhere for any reason. This meant Karen had independently hacked into the security system on her own, a serious federal crime with significant legal consequences. Finally, I uncovered what could only be described as the smoking gun. Karen had been systematically forging signatures of other HOA board members on important legal documents, including approving fines, changing regulations, and authorizing expenditures. I could prove this conclusively through professional handwriting analysis, digital timestamps on electronic documents, and comparison with legitimate signatures on file. With all this comprehensive evidence carefully documented and legally verified, I realized Karen wasn't just an authoritarian HOA president drunk on power. She was operating as a systematic fraudster who had been stealing from and manipulating an entire community for years. And now I had all the weapons I needed to fight back effectively. I made the strategic decision not to confront Karen privately or give her any opportunity to prepare a defense. Instead, I would use her own favorite stage, a public HOA meeting where she loved to perform for an audience. I formally requested a special meeting following all proper legal procedures, sending certified notifications to all residents within the legally required time frame, and ensuring everything was done by the book. Karen initially refused to hold the meeting, probably sensing that something was wrong, but when I calmly threatened to report her refusal to the state HOA Oversight Committee as another violation of her duties, she was forced to agree to the meeting or face additional legal consequences. On the night of the meeting, the community centre was more crowded than I'd ever seen it in my 2 years living there. Most neighbours attended, many of them clearly curious about what they'd heard described as the big showdown between Karen and me. She arrived fashionably late, with her usual supreme confidence, wearing a bright red floral blouse with her blonde hair perfectly styled, clearly expecting another easy victory. I hope Mr. Martinez has prepared a proper apology for his disruptive behavior. Karen opened the meeting with her characteristic condescending tone. After his continued uncooperative behavior and blatant regulatory violations, we need to discuss serious consequences and potential legal action to protect our community standards. Mrs. Thompson, I interrupted politely but firmly, standing up with my laptop and projector ready. Before you continue with your presentation, I'd like to share some information that I believe our neighbours will find extremely interesting and relevant to tonight's discussion. The room fell silent as residents sensed the tension in my voice. I calmly turned on the projector I'd set up and displayed the first piece of evidence, crystal clear video footage of Karen opening my garage with her phone while speaking to someone about her universal code. This is high-definition video evidence of illegal breaking and entering into my private property last Monday morning at approximately 9:15 a.m. Mrs. Thompson used an unauthorized hack code to open my garage door without permission, consent, or any legal authority. The room erupted in immediate murmurs as neighbors processed what they were seeing. Karen tried desperately to defend herself, her voice rising defensively. I have the legal right to inspect properties for HOA violations. This is part of my official duties as president. Her usual confidence was already beginning to crack under the scrutiny. Really? I displayed the next slide, showing a complete copy of the official HOA regulations with relevant sections highlighted in bright yellow. I've carefully reviewed our bylaws, and I can't find any clause that allows the HOA president to enter residents' private property without permission. In fact, this clearly violates multiple state laws regarding breaking an entry, trespassing, and unlawful entry. I continued methodically with the next piece of evidence, maintaining my calm demeanor while Karen grew increasingly agitated. But what's even more interesting is that Mrs. Thompson claimed to have received a universal code from our neighborhood security company. Here's an official email from Tech Secure Solutions, the company she specifically named as providing this code. I read the email aloud, clearly so everyone could hear. We confirm that we have never worked with Willowbrook Gardens HOA in any capacity and have never provided any universal access code to anyone for any reason. Any claims to the contrary are false and potentially constitute fraud. The room's energy shifted dramatically as residents began to understand the implications. By this point, Karen was visibly starting to look worried and had lost much of her initial confidence. This is clearly a conspiracy to discredit me and undermine legitimate HOA authority, she protested, but her voice lacked its usual commanding presence. You're taking these things out of context and manipulating the evidence. There's significantly more evidence to present, I continued calmly, displaying a comprehensive financial analysis chart that I'd spent weeks preparing. Over the past 18 months, Mrs. Thompson has spent $45,000 from our community HOA fund on various legal consulting and landscape maintenance services without any official invoices, contracts, or documentation whatsoever. The detailed chart showed every questionable transaction, with dates, amounts, and recipient accounts clearly highlighted. Most interestingly, detailed bank records show these payments went directly to accounts where Mrs. Thompson is listed as the primary beneficiary. In simple terms, she's been stealing our community funds for personal use. The room absolutely erupted at this revelation. Neighbors began shouting questions and demands. Where's our money? Has she been stealing from all of us? How long has this been going on? What else has she taken? The crowd's mood shifted dramatically from curiosity to anger as the full implications of the financial fraud sank in. Karen stood up abruptly, her face turning bright red with anger and embarrassment. These are completely baseless accusations, designed to destroy my reputation. You have absolutely no legal right to investigate HOA finances or make these kinds of serious allegations against an elected official. This was the perfect moment for my final, devastating revelation. Actually, Mrs. Thompson, I have every legal right to access these records. I displayed the last slide, an official legal document with multiple signatures and seals. I'd like to inform everyone present that I am David Martinez, Chief Executive Officer and founder of Secure Home Technologies, the company that designed, installed, and maintains the entire security system for Willowbrook Gardens. The room fell completely and utterly silent as this information processed. I continued with complete calm. Furthermore, according to my original home purchase contract and development agreements, I own 15% equity in Willowbrook Gardens HOA as the original neighborhood developer and technology provider. This legally grants me full access to all financial documents, operational records, and the right to request independent audits at any time. Karen collapsed back into her chair, her face now completely pale as the full implications of my revelation became clear. The woman who had been terrorizing the neighborhood had unknowingly chosen to target the one person with both the technical skills and legal authority to expose her entire operation. I'd also like to share that after conducting a comprehensive analysis of our security system logs, I discovered that Mrs. Thompson has illegally entered at least 12 other homes in our neighborhood when residents were away, using the same unauthorized hack code she used on my property. The room erupted again as neighbors realized the full scope of Karen's violation. Thompson, who had been sitting quietly in the back row, suddenly stood up with obvious relief. I want to apologize to everyone here tonight. I tried repeatedly to stop my wife from these activities, but she refused to listen to my concerns. I'm completely willing to cooperate with any investigation and provide whatever information might be helpful to restore trust in our community. Finally, I displayed my concluding slide with a comprehensive list of actions I'd already taken. I've filed official complaints with the State HOA Oversight Committee regarding regulatory violations, the State Department of Finance concerning fund misuse and embezzlement, and the local police department about the illegal breaking and entering incidents. I've also contacted several attorneys who specialize in HOA disputes to represent any residents who want to pursue legal action. The meeting concluded with a formal vote to immediately remove Karen from her position, which passed with an overwhelming 28-0 margin. Karen and Mark abstained from voting. A temporary board was quickly established to manage community affairs, and Mrs. Chen, a retired certified public accountant with extensive experience, was unanimously elected as interim president to help restore proper financial oversight and community trust. The fundamental lesson here wasn't just about justice being served after a long struggle, but about the critical importance of never underestimating anyone based on surface appearances. Karen had made the fatal mistake of assuming I was just an ordinary computer engineer she could easily bully into submission. She had absolutely no idea that her carefully chosen victim was actually someone with the technical knowledge, financial resources, and legal authority to fight back effectively. 3 months after that historic and transformative meeting, Willowbrook Gardens had become a completely different community, with a dramatically improved atmosphere. Karen Thompson was formally convicted of multiple charges, including community fund embezzlement, illegal breaking and entering, fraud, and abuse of authority. She was court-ordered to repay the full $45,000 to the HOA fund, perform 200 hours of community service, pay substantial legal fees, and was permanently banned from participating in any HOA or community management boards. Mark Thompson filed for divorce shortly after the trial concluded and moved to a different state to start fresh, expressing relief that the nightmare was finally over. The new HOA, under Mrs. Chen's experienced leadership, began operating with complete transparency and genuine democratic principles, holding monthly meetings where all residents could participate in decision-making processes. All existing regulations were thoroughly reviewed by a committee of residents, with many vague and unfair clauses permanently removed. The HOA fund was restructured with strict oversight, requiring multiple signatures for any expenditure and providing detailed monthly financial reports to all residents with complete transparency. Property values actually increased once the oppressive atmosphere was eliminated. I continue to work happily from my garage office, but now it's become something of a neighborhood attraction and symbol of standing up for justice. Many people stop by regularly to see the room where Karen finally got taken down, and I'm always happy to share the complete story with anyone interested in learning about the importance of fighting back against abuse of authority. The most valuable outcome of this entire experience was the restoration of genuine community spirit throughout our neighborhood. Neighbors no longer live in constant fear of arbitrary fines or harassment for decorating their homes according to their personal taste and preferences. Weekend barbecues and block parties have returned with enthusiasm. Children are allowed to play freely without fear of being cited for noise violations, and people actually enjoy living here again. For me personally, this story taught an invaluable lesson about the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it seems easier to just keep your head down and avoid conflict. Initially, I just wanted to work quietly in my converted garage without bothering anyone. But when pushed into a corner by systematic harassment and abuse of power, I realized that sometimes you absolutely must use whatever skills and resources you have to protect not just yourself, but your entire community. Most importantly, this experience proves that real power doesn't come from shouting, threatening, or trying to intimidate people, but from knowledge, careful preparation, and the wisdom to use legal systems intelligently and effectively. Karen thought she had ultimate power because she held an official title and could issue fines, but true power belongs to those who understand how to work within proper legal frameworks while taking genuine responsibility for their community's well-being. Every time I look at my peaceful garage office, I'm reminded that sometimes the apparent prey in a situation is actually the hunter carefully waiting in disguise for the right moment to act. The message is crystal clear. Never underestimate anyone based on appearances, and justice will always find a way to prevail, as long as you're patient and smart enough to use the right tools and legal resources available to you.